Hello, and welcome to this edition of People in Transition. I'm your host, Bob Gerst. I've been hiring and mentoring executives, frontline employees, and job seekers for nearly 40 years through a host of transitions, some difficult, but most very good. This experience has given me a bird's eye view on a variety of trends, economies, industry disruptors, and transitions, big and small. It also brought me into contact with the thought leaders and decision makers you need to meet. Imagine knowing exactly what to do next and how to know it's time to make your big job change. We all know transitions can be scary, but it doesn't have to be. And it's even fun when you have actionable strategies and proven tactics to achieve the future you want. We'll share with you the tools and skills that can take your dreams to your next great job. So if change is on your horizon, you won't want to miss this discussion. Also, please subscribe to this podcast so you won't miss any future episodes. Dr. Kimberly Moore, I am so excited about our conversation this morning. I've been looking forward to this for a long time. Thank you for joining us.
Well, I am so excited to be joining you, Bob, and our listeners. So yes, it's a win to have this conversation today.
Dr. Moore, one of my signature questions that my listeners always enjoy hearing about because it helps them, I think, know my guests better. What was it when you were a child that you wanted to be someday when you grew up?
Well, I can tell you, we're going to go just a ways back down the road, not too far though, don't want to date myself, but I could remember as early as the age of 14, writing down that I wanted to be a CEO of a company, to lead a company, to make those decisions. And yeah, that's exactly what was on my list.
And what were the transition moments that you went through from that picture of yourself as a child that you thought you wanted to be a CEO to where you're at today?
So that transition actually led me to what I call my 3.0, but I'll fill in the gaps for the listeners. So I literally, I went to college after that, of course, and then my second job was in workforce development, where I started with a company and asked the then CEO while I was in orientation, what does it take to get the job that you're in? And I remember him saying that, it's put 30 years in, I paid my dues. And I remember mouthing, being this young whippersnapper that I don't have that long. But lo and behold, fate was in my corner. And 7 years later, I actually was leading the company as the CEO. So that was my 1.0. And then I moved into education, where I served as a vice president for workforce innovation. And then I would call for my 3.0 is what I'm doing now, is taking all of those skills and leading my own company as an entrepreneur.
That leads me actually to our first question that I have for you, Dr. Moore. Your career trajectory has encompassed roles like education, nonprofit management, and now as your chief innovator at Envision Moore Consulting Group. Can you tell us how these diverse experiences shapes the advice you have for individuals navigating transitions between different stages of their own professional journey?
Every experience that you have is certainly, it's not a waste. Every skill that you learn and how you use it to position yourself. I would say even taking it as far back as how I made my way through college. I was a manager at McDonald's. Even using those skills, those interpersonal skills, to be able to work with the different groups of people, even and taking that into my professional world. So I would say to you, the training that you receive, the experiences that you have by way of engaging others, all of that is critical. I have literally woven all of the pieces of my career, whether it was being CEO of a company to catapulting that into education and recognizing that the work I did was like leading a company that had to have, return on investment and the goals and working with people and being able to set strategy. Using all of that in that environment where I stood up a for-profit and nonprofit, I have now been able to use those skills that I've learned from the very beginning to stand up my own organization. So again, as you see in this example, every experience gets used. So don't ever miss the moment or opportunity to learn.
Dr. Moore, can you walk us through your experience in assisting individuals with finding, let's say, their first job, or when they are personally transitioning, or maybe they're starting a second career?
Absolutely, especially in the environment that we're in. There's lots of transition. So being ready and understanding where you are. My experience actually with the company that I led actually was tasked with working with job seekers, regardless of what stage they were in, whether it's their first job or whether they were looking for a better job or whether they just wanted to make sure that they had the skills that they could receive a promotion in their current company. So working with those individuals, working with veterans, working with dislocated workers, second chance individuals who had a brush with law enforcement, youth, really across the board, or even with executives who were looking for the right talent. So I have had my 20 plus years of doing not only working with employers, but also making sure that the job seekers who were looking for that next step had the skills that they need to not only win, but to really be thriving in a career.
And is it that skill development that is most critical in that array of candidates that you've worked with? Is it that skill development that you think separates those that are successful in their job search from those that are not?
I think it's experience, but it's also tenacity and energy behind the search. I have always encouraged individuals to treat their job search as if it were a job, that you're very committed to it, that you're very much accountable to what you're doing, the time that you're putting in, and that you're being strategic. One of those things, and just as a quick example, is when it comes to resumes. When I meet individuals who have had, a variety of jobs, and I ask them the number of resumes that they have, and they said, well, I only have one. Well, clearly, with so much competition, we need to have a variety of resumes that speak to the specific job that you're applying for. So all of that to say, I have encouraged not only experience is a good way to land the job, but also commitment, tenacity, and energy behind the job search coupled is the better way to go after it.
Let's talk just for a moment in terms of networking. And some people love the concept of that. Some would rather go have a root canal before they went out networking. Can you talk about some of the effective strategies for networking in today's competitive job market?
I know it's something that everyone has heard, but certainly it bears repeating. It's who you know, not what you know. And I would say that holds true for the current environment that we're in now. So your network, your desire and willingness to meet other people. Because one of the challenges that I think job seekers find is that you are more often willing to continue conversations with the people that you already know. But if everyone's unemployed, then that's not necessarily the best game plan. So you really have to stretch yourself. So some of those ways, whether it's online networking, which we all got accustomed to by way of COVID, whether it's meeting people in your community at events or perhaps even conferences. If you attended school, then there are alumni networks that you can be a part of. I think the other part of it is to just never underestimate the power of social media and establishing your brand and making sure that those who you are connected with and those who you like to connect with know what you're up to and know what your skills are. And then the last one is just remembering personal branding. That's so critical, and you can only brand if you're out there networking and people know what you do and what you've done in your prior roles.
Let's talk about that personal branding for just a bit. What does it really mean to have a personal brand, and how can I leverage that so that I can stand out in the marketplace?
Well, a personal brand really showcases your skills, your expertise, and what makes you different. So whether that's a website, a blog, or even maintaining your, I call it your place on sites such as LinkedIn, it's critical that those around you know who you are and what you do. And that really, in order to do that, it's consistent messaging. What do you talk about consistently and what do you show as the results piece? Are you a thought leader in that space? That is what branding does for you. And I would encourage you, again, with such a competitive space now, figuring out and staying on a path of branding will be critical for not only now, but even for going forward.
And how can I know what my brand is? And are there other ways that I can shape it in this marketplace to help me again stand out?
Sure. Part of knowing, sometimes it's so funny, depending upon where you are in your career, you may be very young in the career and you're thinking, hey, I don't know. Oftentimes, those who are in your, I call it your trusted advisory circle, though, or even previous employers may be able to share that information, maybe by way of evaluation, maybe your former coworkers, maybe your current coworkers, and asking that question, what is it that I do extremely well that if you had to look at everything I do, what would be the top 2 or 3 things that stand out? Some of you, depending upon if you're further along in your career, you figured out that thing that you do extremely well, or you really put the time into doing something very well that you know what it is. In either case, once you know what that is, and that if you're in agreement, because one of the things that I would encourage, just because people say that's your best thing, and if you don't buy into that and you want that to be your best thing, then I wouldn't encourage you to build that as part of your brand, because you're not going to enjoy doing that, even though you perform it well. So being mindful of that. And once you know what that brand is how do you move forward with putting it in places that individuals will see, whether it's your resume, whether it's your online presence, or whether it's your sales pitch. I say a sales pitch, but your 30-second elevator conversation that you are able to share at a networking event. All of that goes into branding and making you memorable along with the skills that you possess.
Kim, can you share a pivotal moment or an experience that you had from your own career journey that significantly influenced your approach to job transitioning?
I think probably what significantly kind of pushed me in this whole space of understanding transition and appreciating it is when I was leading a company, when I was CEO. There was this whole thought that once you've arrived at the CEO role, that you could potentially just stay in that role and not seek to grow beyond. Well, my desire was always to go and bet on myself and go beyond. So hence the reason why I was able to transition into a field and career that had not been something that I had under my belt previously, and that's education. That was the best move for me because it gave me both, I call it a hybrid skill set, that not only was I using the business piece of understanding employers, community, and strategy, but I was applying that in a space of education where I could use that to help people, same kind of commitment and mission, helping people get the skills that they need to better align with the jobs that were out there. So I saw it as really kind of like this dual threat, this great thing of being able to use the best of both worlds and positioning me honestly to be able to do the job that I'm doing now with my own company.
It sounds like you're talking about no matter if you're an entry level or the CEO, there is a tomorrow, and you have to keep looking at that tomorrow. And how do you change yourself and set yourself up to be successful in that tomorrow? Which really leads us to emerging trends, whether they be market trends or technology or just the subject of work itself. If you pull out, Kim, your crystal ball and look at some of those trends and the impact that it has on job seekers, what do you see out there?
Well, what I see as major trends right now, there is a strong push for skills. Doesn't mean that education and the degrees that you're seeking will no longer be relevant. It just means that the employers are really placing a keen eye on skills. What does that mean? Your ability to be able to go into a job day one and perform a certain thing. The difference between that is that in years prior, where education might be the driver with a degree, the opportunity that's been created, especially with COVID, is that, that's theory. And now we need to make sure that we have people that can apply those skills today. So it's really opening the doors of opportunity for a whole lot more individuals to be able to enter the workforce and progress. I think the other part that's really showing out as an emerging trend is technology, utilization of it. We hear it, AI, how it's being used. There's some concern whether it will take jobs. I have happen to be on the side of that you have to understand how to use technology, whether it's AI or whatever it may be that comes thereafter, in a way that allows you to be most productive and efficient in the roles that you're in. I think everything is pointing to how do we make sure that you're able and ready to not only to do your job today, but what it's speaking to is the future. How do you make sure that you're nimble enough to take on new skills? So this whole idea, though it sounds old, of learning for life or lifelong learning, it's never been more, I would say, appropriate than it is right now. So those I would point out as the big three.
Kim, I'm chairman of the board of directors for a university that is 80% minority students. And the thing that I see is the inequality of access and use of technology, whether it is in their education pursuit or as they look for jobs and as they try to get advancement when they are in the job. How do we bridge that inclusive, more equitable access to technology to help people who may be of color that are looking for jobs? Any suggestions, any ideas?
Certainly. The first thing I'd say is that collaboration and partnering with entities, when I think about the Googles, the Microsoft, there are a number of organizations and companies, and even in Dell goes into that same category of wanting to partner with institutions and speak to that common area of what you brought up is how do we make sure that we level the playing field, ensure that there is access, but not only access, opportunity. A number of these groups I have worked with in the past, and what I loved about this, not only were they investing and partnering with educational institutions, but they were also providing what I would say internship opportunities that could lead to employment. So it was really that kind of strategy, and I call it foresight of the institution of reaching out and identifying those partners who have that as their goal and mission and making sure that the students benefit from it.
Kim, you transitioned from academia to consulting, and it requires almost a mind shift in addition to a skill set shift. And in today's marketplace, I think many job seekers may have to make their own shift as they look for their next great job. What have you seen as some of the biggest challenges faced during your own transition and clients that you've coached? And more important, I think, is how did you overcome them?
So I would say to you that I have always been an active learner. So everything, regardless of whether it was my role or not, I am utilizing those skills. For instance, when you have your own company, certainly branding and marketing and communication, it's critical. It is critical, and you need to reach the masses, especially with having a national firm like mine. So in that case, I am using a ton of my marketing skills, though that was never a role that I had per se. I made sure that as part of the individuals that I've worked with that held those roles or even provided service to my company in the past when I was CEO, that I acquired those skills. So whether it was radio, whether it was TV and writing those things, or whether it was having an online brand, whether it was now with 2 established podcasts, being able to communicate. So that wasn't a big one. The whole notion of being responsible for your own company and for the people that work for you, I would say that wasn't a mindset change for me because that's how I felt, to be very honest, since my first jobs. Even when I was working in restaurants at McDonald's as a manager, I always treated my shift that if this were mine, this is what I do. When I became CEO, same approach, of course. And then, of course, even in the vice president roles, I was always very cognizant of what this meant if it were mine totally and I was totally responsible for it. And that was just my approach. So it hasn't been a mindset shift. It's just been channeling all of the outcomes to say, no, now you're not pretending and saying the what if. The reality is this is your company.
Kim, I see collaboration being more and more important in the workplace. And I think that recruiters oftentimes look for that in candidates that they're interviewing. How can you spotlight that skill that you might have in that whole world of collaboration?
So collaboration is critical, whether it's collaborating internally or externally. Your ability to work with other people to address progress and reach a common goal, it is key. So if you are a job seeker or in transition right now, having some examples in your back pocket, which shows your ability to work with your colleagues, or if you've been in I call it a more advanced role where it meant working with external partners, being able to share what that looked like. How did you identify the partner? Were they already in place? What were the goals that you were seeking to achieve? Internally, it could be a task, a big project or assignment. That is a critical one that employers are absolutely seeking, and they want to know how you will mesh not only with their team, but also how you'll be able to work collaboratively to bring about results.
Kim, you've mentioned a couple of times your focus, your commitment to lifelong learning and the impact that it has on career transitions. What are some of the strategies that you recommend to individuals to continuously upskill themselves and stay relevant in today's market, especially if you could talk about that with the more mature worker that might be looking for their next great job?
Sure. So, some of the things that I would always encourage, that it doesn't always have to be formal education. You don't always have to sign up for a full-fledged class, a semester or 2 years or whatever the case may be. There are so many different opportunities to learn now. I think about LinkedIn Learning, the whole idea of making available at your fingertips ongoing training that leads to certificates that you will automatically tie back to your resume as a just-in-time skill. The whole notion of just continuing to reimagine and be ready for the moment, it's key. You can also look at learning from others. There are associations and organizations. I mentioned alumni. There's so many different workshops and places that you can gather information. The caution that I would give to our listeners today is to just be mindful. You need to be strategic. What is it that you want to learn, and how do you wish to apply it? I mean, there's some basis for saying you just don't need to learn. You really do need to also be learning and being strategic about how you plan to use the information. How will it allow you to remain in employment, advance in employment, transition in employment? How will it allow you to set yourself apart? Those are all questions and things that you need to be thinking about, which then goes to the point of why learning is so critical. I would also share with our listeners as well, especially while you're in transition, for the jobs that you are most interested in, going and looking at those job descriptions and seeing what skills are required. If there are skills that are present that you are lacking, then certainly that needs to be your target. And you also need to be mindful, just because, technology and time being what time is and how fast things change, is knowing what's cutting edge, being a self-aware, and also being one of those readers to figure out that, hey, this is coming up. And if this is coming up, how can I best prepare myself for that opportunity to be ready for employment and transition, or perhaps even starting your own business?
From your perspective, what role does a mentor play in helping someone during their job search? And the follow-up question to that is that if you think that it does play a role, how can I find a mentor to help me with that?
So I think mentors are important. I do think that mentoring, it should be thought about as a two-way street. It's not just, I call it the ATM of referrals. It really should be an opportunity where you're able to both give back or give to one another. I would say that mentors, not only do they offer encouragement, but they can also offer accountability. They can also offer insight. Perhaps if they're working in a field that you're looking to enter into, their insight about that, and possibly even referrals. When it comes to what I believe that the transitioning person would be able to give to that mentor and while they're the mentee, it is certainly committing yourself to the conversation and to the relationship. What that means is that if they're taking their time to invest in you, making sure that you're ready for the moment and the time that they're giving you, making sure that you've done whatever legwork or homework that you need to do to make sure sure that it's a meaningful conversation. I think the other part, it should always be gone into, especially by the mentee, with the mindset that you're going to look for ways to give that back. Give that back to others, someone else who may find themselves in the same spot that you were in, so that this whole, I call it, investment in others is continuing to occur. Some of the ways that you could identify mentors is, of course, by way of your network. I think, again, technology has made it super easy to do, whether it's LinkedIn, that's your home of choice, or social media platform of choice, or maybe even Facebook. I mean, there's tons of them out there where you see people. I would probably encourage LinkedIn, but where they are doing and performing in a certain role. It's been super easy to reach out to them, drop a note, and ask for some time, because again, the distance that's been erased by Zoom and whatever other platforms, teams, individuals may be using, it makes it, an opportunity for you to have these conversations. So I would encourage both your in-person as well as your online kind of networking, but please be prepared when you're seeking a mentor that you're committed to do what you need to do on your end.
Kim, looking for a job, you've described it as a job unto itself, but it has a roller coaster emotional element to it. The highs of getting an interview, the lows of being rejected. How do you coach people to deal with that overwhelming emotional aspect of the job search?
I think we really have to go into it that every application, every resume that hits a desk or a computer will not lead to a home run. But if you have prepared and you have done your best, made sure you have the updated resume, it gets you closer to that next opportunity. I think you should, one, be encouraged and inspired about the skills that you have and how you're willing and wanting to put them in the best place possible. And sometimes I would say to you that the no or the rejection is the best thing for you, because perhaps it would not have been the best place to utilize your skills. We should not, I would say to job seekers, allow desperation to drive, poor decision making, because you really don't want to end up in a worse situation. So I would say make sure that you have a support system, because I think it's going to be important. You know that, again, you will receive some rejections. You won't receive all yeses. And in that case, you're going to want someone in your corner to keep you inspired and be a part, helping you to stay encouraged. I think the other is really taking care of yourself. The self-care, cannot put enough emphasis on that, whether it's mental well-being or whether it's your physical health, but really taking note of that, getting the amount of appropriate sleep on that, and then focus on those things that you can control. You can't give yourself a job, but you absolutely can be the best prepared person, skill-wise, interview preparation-wise, to be able to go and do the best job that you can do. And I think the other part is to continue to seek out opportunities to learn while you're doing the search. And then lastly, stay persistent. You will win with persistence. So don't give up, because there are so many great things that you have to do.
Kim, if you were to coach someone, the two things that they need to keep in mind when they are in that interview, whether it's a Zoom interview or a telephone or an in-person, what's the one or two things that you tell your clients to help them hit a home run for that interview?
Well, first thing is be prepared mentally and even with your physical dress, even if it happens via one of the online platforms. I think the other piece of it is to be prepared for the common questions that are going to get asked, which include examples. So thinking about those most frequently asked questions and making sure that you have a response, not a robot response, but a response that allows for the individual who's asking the questions to really have an understanding that you would not only know what is going on if this really happened and you were someone that got the job. I think the other piece of it is having some follow-up questions. What are those questions that you are curious about regarding that organization? So having your readiness and then being prepared to ask them questions, I think is critical.
Kim, any books or other resources that you would recommend to someone who is in transition?
I think, and it happens to be, there's a host of books that are out there, I would actually encourage individuals to, if they're not set their profiles up for LinkedIn, to actually utilize that, because there's lots of, I call it just-in-time training that makes it bite-sized, because there are so many individuals that, again, job search in and of itself is a job. So you want to figure out a way to learn, but don't want to eat the whole elephant in a day. You like to be, strategic in it. So with LinkedIn Learning, it allows you to do just that. And it gives you the insight as far as what are the top skills that employers are looking for, which then they make available those training opportunities for you to take advantage of. So why I encourage it, again, it takes the guesswork out of your job search, and it positions you for not only growth and learning, but also connecting you with your next opportunity.
Dr. Moore, we went through so much information today and it was value packed. If our listeners take away only 3 things from today's discussion, what are the 3 most critical things you want them to remember?
3 things to remember, and I can roll these off really quick. Stay encouraged, never give up. And then the third thing, use your network. Use your network.
Kim, I knew that this was going to be a great discussion and you didn't let us down. I want to thank you so much for your time, for your caring, for people to help them be successful in their job search, and to remind them that stay encouraged, stay consistent, stay focused on the future. Thank you. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Good luck.
Thank you for listening. We're working in unprecedented times. The purpose of these episodes is to give you the support and critical tools to adjust with the changing marketplace. I'll continue to introduce you to guests who have successfully survived their own obstacle course and can share useful information. If today's message was helpful to you, please share it on your social media. Your review and rating helps get this to more people. Also, if you have questions or podcast ideas for future conversations, reach out to me on LinkedIn. Change is constant. The more prepared you are for it, the better and easier the change will occur. Thank you again. This is your host, Bob Gerst. See you at our next episode.